Birds, people, and the dogs that bring them together. This is episode number 14. My name is Bill, and you're tied to the Woe Post. So this last week, all right, look, I'm not a bad shot. I won the Joint Special Operations Command Small Arms Championship Rifle Competition one year. I took second place in the All Army Small Arms Championship Long Range Service Rifle one year. But last week I missed a turkey at 45 yards. And I don't know how you miss a turkey. I was really beating myself up about this. And then I listened to Nick Larson's podcast, the Birdshot podcast. And he and a couple guys spent some time talking about the birds that they missed, the turkeys that they missed. So I felt a little bit better after listening to that podcast, and I stopped beating myself up a little bit, I guess. But I'm going to get that bird. I did manage to get my pollinator gardens planted with local wildflowers. Don't ask me to tell you what's in there. I don't know. I bought a local wildflower mix and tilled it up and planted it. I also planted my food plot in the back 40 with clover, chicory, turnips, and radishes. And hopefully I'll be turning that into venison this fall. But today we're going to talk about the Braque du Bourbonais. Likely originating from the Braque Français, the Braque du Bourbonais dates back to the late 1500s from the Bourbon province of France. In fact, Braque is French for to aim or point. So the Braque du Bourbonnais is the pointer from Bourbon, or Bourbon. It's French. I don't know. They're smaller versatile dogs ranging from 19 to 22 and a half inches in height and about 35 to 53 pounds. They have a smooth, short, ticked coat that can be chestnut or fawn in color. They have a very middle-of-the-road temperament, not overly outgoing or reserved, neither energetic nor lazy, neither vigilant nor passive. They're highly cooperative and trainable and well-suited for the foot hunter. Today we have Steve and Amber Kielman from Sioux Ridge Pointers, the largest breeders of Braque du Bourbonnais in the country, to tell us all about the BDB, their kennel, and their dogs. Hey guys, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Oh, doing great. Thanks so much for being on the show.
It's our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Can you go ahead and just tell me who you are?
Sure. I'm Steve Kielman, Brandon, South Dakota. I have my wife joining us.
Hi, I'm Amber
Kielman, and we're breeders of Braque du Bourbonnais dogs here in South Dakota, and have had a great time doing it and growing as a kennel, growing as a reputation, I think, for our kennel. And we're excited, like I said, to talk about them today with you. So thank you for having us.
So the S is silent in Bourbonnais. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes. And I've heard, like the guy, if you said you were at the Pheasant Fest with the puppy walk, and that guy lost his mind when he got to introduce Braque du Bourbonnais, because that was the loudest he talked all day. Braque du Bourbonnais. So he has different pronunciations for it, and he probably repeated that 20 times. So
I remember that now that you bring it up. Actually, that was pretty funny.
Yeah, it's a cool name.
So I imagine then anytime you go somewhere and people say, what kind of dog is that? You get a whole story that you get to tell them. Have you developed your elevator pitch? Did you get it down to, a minute or less?
Right. We have. And then we just tell them it's a French pointer. You'll never remember how to spell this, but it's bourbon with like mayonnaise on the end. So just another NAIS. But we always carry a business card with us so they can go to our website. And usually we only have one color of the dog, whether it's the fawn color or the liver. And so that way they can look at the different variations of the dogs. And some of them are a little shorter to the ground, and other ones are leggier and have a more blacky head. So that way they get to see more than just that one example of the dog. But yeah, we tell them it's a French pointer that's calm as a cat in the house. As soon as you get outside, turn on a switch and the thing's just ready to go. And, very athletic, easy to maintain. It doesn't have much of a coat. It's like a short-haired dog. So you don't have to do a lot of brushing. You don't have to pull burrs out of it after you get out of the field. And that's pretty much it. They're asking questions. I barely have to get into that. They're asking a million questions. So
I wish I had that same luxury, but anytime I go to the woods, I am brushing stuff out of my small Munsterlander. She's very well appointed, I suppose, is a good way to say. She's got very strong feathering on all four legs and a very, very feathered tail, which just loves to collect anything out there. So
and the ears.
the ears, her ear, she does have some fringing on her ears, but it's not as long as some small Munsterlanders that I've seen. So maybe I get away with a little bit there. But I'll tell you, once the cockleburs dry out here, I almost don't like bringing my dogs to the woods with the cockleburs. They get so matted and so heavy in there, and then you can't pull them out without stabbing yourself.
That's what I tell them is the advantage of this short-haired dog is. I said, if you want, and they're telling me I like Brittany's a lot. And I said, well, Brittany's are another French dog. It's a nice dog. I love Brittany's. But man, oh man, like you said, at the end of the day, I'm out there with a comb or a brush or a scissors or a razor to shave the dog. For sure, at the end of the season, you almost have to shave them because they're matted. There's no way you can get all that stuff out of them. So that's what we talk about a little bit, and we make it a habit that we have those dogs with us at all times. We bought a newer top of the line F-150, and if you went in and looked at that right now, you'd see that the windowsills are chewed with dog teeth marks. There's at least a quarter inch of hair in every bit of the floor mats, and so we've converted that into a dog car or dog truck.
It sounds like they converted it for you.
Yeah, they did, and so we had to buy a new truck that humans can go in.
Oh,
because I have elderly parents, and they're not going to sit in the back seat of a car with a couple of months worth of dog hair in it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we can plug up the vacuums at the car wash too, but that's the benefit of owning a short-haired dog. They shed. There's nothing you can do to get around it.
Nope. And it's some fine hair that just loves to get matted and embedded into carpet and things, and makes it pretty tough. That is one benefit about the Munsterlander. So we vacuum because of our poodle pointer.
Mm-hmm.
Not because of our Munsterlander. And I'm not going to say she doesn't shed at all. She absolutely does, but a fraction of the amount that our poodle pointer does.
Yeah, and that's quite a coat on those poodle pointers too. We have two elderly ones that are just out to pasture, a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old, and are healthy as they'll jump up on me when I get in the kennel. They're so excited to see us. They can eat any kind of food. We have them on, elderly dog food or whatever, but they're just as. I've never seen a sturdier dog than those two. That they're that age. So there's a testament to the poodle pointer that we're not talking about that today, but I will give a testament to that because, man, those are long-lived and healthy.
They're great dogs. I do get a little bit frustrated when somebody says, "Oh, poodle pointer, is that like a Labradoodle?"
Yeah. No, I don't even think the guy that invented or first bred those Labradoodles he hides when he goes in public because he's embarrassed that he did that. That wasn't the optimum idea for because it's too easy to here we are talking about purebred dogs that are well pedigreed. Those dogs may have zero pedigree. They might be the dumbest two dogs from either litter, but you got one of each, a male and a female, and a poodle and a lab or a golden retriever or whatever they mix it with, or a lab. And so you might get the worst of both worlds. And I can attest to that with my neighbors who had those dogs.
Kelly Aitken said on this podcast a couple weeks ago that just because they have testicles and ovaries doesn't mean that they should breed.
That's right. That's right. Well, and that's when I was younger. We bred dogs. I was a chef in those days of my life. And we bred German Shorthairs. And we did without any sense for the most part. We did get some really good dogs from Missouri that were well pedigreed, but then after we got those, we also found some local dogs, and we got them for their color. And so I had an all brown short hair, and then I had a almost pure white. Thinking that we might get some pure brown or pure white. That's not the equation to get either one. And so we got just the dogs that we got. But it's amazing that when you don't have any more sense than what I had in those days, what you do. Because we just got 2 dogs that were random out of wherever, and we had puppies. And we had a lot of puppies because that breed together with that brown and white dog, we usually had 14 puppies.
For each litter?
Yeah, each litter, 14.
Wow. That does seem to be a trend, though, that there are a lot of breeders that start out just with an interest in dogs or an interest in bird dogs,
right,
and wanting to breed. And just like anybody else, they don't know anything about it, and they just, I'm gonna breed these 2 dogs. And then the more they learn about it, the better they get as breeders. And what I've noticed just from doing a bunch of these podcasts is a lot of them end up changing breeds and basically rebranding their whole kennel to start out and say, you know what, I want to be deliberate about this. I want to start with great breeding stock, and I want to produce the best hunting dogs that I possibly can.
Right. And I think that happens with maturity. We were young. I was probably in my middle 20s then. And we saw that as maybe a little bit of a money-making adventure too. And, as we grew and matured ourselves and got into more specific breeds of dogs, and especially these rare breeds, if you can break even breeding dogs, I would say a lot of times, unless you're really putting out a volume, that's if you do it right, I guess that's the caveat I'll put in there. So it did teach us. But once we got to the rare breeds, we started feeling a big responsibility of taking care of that breed. It's had some challenges over the course of history where in the 20s and in the 70s, they almost went extinct. Then it was because of several things. One of them was because there was a World War I and World War II in Europe, and France took the brunt of both of those wars. And then secondarily, they got so that they were more concerned about the fact that these dogs had short tails or no tails whatsoever. And when they did that, and then they looked like the conformity in the coat, they bred the hunting out of the dog, and they got a lot of short-tailed dogs that weren't a lot of value to anybody. So, if you're breeding a hunting dog that can't hunt purposefully, yeah, good luck with it. The breed barely survived that. And so back in the early 70s, a gentleman by the name of Michel Comte wanted to take it as his responsibility to fix that breed and bring it back together. So he collected as many of those dogs as he could. Not all of them maybe were even purebreds, but as much as he could with that Bourbonnais trait to it. And then he bred and line bred and crossbred and did whatever they could to get that breed back. And then eventually, by the middle of the 80s, maybe even the early 80s, people in the United States started to notice those dogs. And so they purchased some of the dogs from the European owners. They weren't all, centrally located in France, but there wasn't a lot of the dogs, maybe a few thousand. And so they would get a few of them here in the U.S. And some of the lineage of some of those dogs is still in the dogs we buy today because of the things that they did in the 80s to bring those forward. One of the guys that we bought the kennel from initially had purchased dogs in the 80s. They still, that's many, many, many generations ago, but some of that bloodline still exists. And the challenge with having that small population, if there's 2,000 or 3,000 in France, there's maybe 2,000 or 3,000 in the U.S. too. And at that point in time, trying to find a couple of dogs that are far enough unrelated to one another, it's a challenge. I mean, there's no easy way to put that together. So a lot of the breeders that I work with or that I'm aware of go to France or go to Italy or go to wherever. I think 2 of the dogs we have, one's from Czechoslovakia, one's from France, and one's from Lithuania. And the only way to get that, you and I talked about this at a different time, that COI, that inbredness, to a quotient that it's acceptable or that it's reasonable, you have to bring in new blood from Europe for the most part, because most of these dogs have some relationship if you go back 4 or 5 generations. there's common ancestry. And I bet it's that way with Munsterlanders too.
We do have that problem, and for a lot of the same reasons. We haven't had an issue with bench breeding with our breed, at least not here in the United States. The majority of the breeders in Europe bench breed and field breed. I mean, their process for breeding, I think, is a lot more mature than ours is. So it's
Right.
not uncommon there to find a dog that's championed on the bench side and championed in, on the trials side.
Oh, nice.
There are a lot more breeders doing that. Doesn't mean that it's easy to import those dogs back here to the States. And I have no experience with importing dogs. I've never even tried to do that. My mentor has imported a bunch of them.
And I think it's just it's a difficulty because you never know, especially since the only possible opportunity you have is unless you fly to Lithuania or France, is to look at them, like, on the internet, on photos or videos, and take the word of the breeder. And there's people that are honest and take good care of you, and then there's people that aren't. And we've had experience with both. We have some of the best dogs we've ever got from Europe, and some of the dogs that we immediately spayed and rehomed, just
Right.
because no possibility for them to breed because of some anomaly that we didn't like about the dog. And so who knows, when you do that, I'd rather buy something in the US if I could, because I can go see it and I can talk to the other owners that purchase dogs from that breeder, so I can know what I'm getting at least. And a little different there, but you take your shot. And yeah, that's a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 transaction every time you do that. And so when people have this misconception that you're making a ton of money breeding dogs, take $6,000, $7,000 out of your budget for that, out of your revenue stream for that breed, or for that breeding. Pretty soon you see that you do it for the love of the dogs. I mean, if you're going to do it right, I think most of it's for the love of the dogs, because unless you breed a ton of dogs, it's hard to do that. And wasn't ever our desire to breed a ton of dogs, although I'd like to get as many of these dogs out in public as I can possibly do, so that there's an awareness, because I think there's so many breeds that exist out there that nobody's ever seen. They might have heard about them. They might have been at Pheasant Fest and got a chance to take a 5-minute look at one of those dogs, but there hasn't been a chance for them to ever be around them and say, boy, I would really like one of those. And so kind of our goal has been to get more and more of these into the people that guide pheasant hunts in South Dakota. South Dakota is the pheasant capital of the world, supposedly, or that's what it touts itself as. And I'd have to agree that it'd be hard pressed to find a much better place to go. But what I can see is that if I get those dogs in those hands of those guides, then people from all over the United States get to see them in the field. And so that's been kind of our strategy here in the last year or two, to try and, even if I discount the dog or let them use them during hunting season, let them use some of my dogs during hunting season. Not only do my dogs get over hundreds and hundreds of birds without me having to pay for every one of those, but
Right.
secondarily, it gets it all over, the population that's here hunting, and they're all hunters. And a lot of people want a dog after they see a good dog. I mean, you and I both know if you go hunting and you don't have a dog, I don't care where you live, you don't get very positive results in most cases.
You might scratch out a bird.
Yeah, and that's just about it. With a dog, that changes that whole dynamic.
That's a smart strategy, I think, to put your dog or your dogs in the hands of the guides and to try and get the breed name out there, because not only is it, you're getting experience for your dogs, you're promoting your kennel, but you're also getting your dogs to the right puppy buyers.
Right. And it's worked so far. I mean, it has been a success. And most of the time, or not most of the time, some of the time we hear responses back from one of the preserves that they're hunting on, and they say, you know what, every time the guides come in here, they want to take one of your dogs out. I mean, whatever, I don't know, they might have labs, they might have short hairs, I don't know what all of them hunt with, but predominantly labs probably. But they want to take the pointing dogs out because the fields are manicured and groomed in such a way that you can, you and I could walk, I'm an old fat guy, so I could walk down there just as easily as if I was walking down the street. It's all groomed for that.
Right.
But that also means the pheasants have that alleyway as well. And so if you don't get them to sit still, it's a lot harder to shoot them. So that's what we've been working on and working for. That's been a little bit of a success, but I appreciate the fact that you think that's a good idea, because it's just something at one point you got to figure out how to get, when you have such wonderful dogs, to get a way to get it out there so that the public's aware of that they exist. That's the challenge.
I was out yesterday, and I try to bring my dogs to the places that I can whenever I can. And I was out yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday, with my dogs, and we walk them through the store one at a time. So I walked in and got a couple of things and checked out, and went and put that dog in the truck, and then got the other dog and walked in with him and picked up a couple more things. and the store employees and the clerks and stuff, they're looking at me like, wasn't this guy just in here? But that's not the same dog. I get a kick out of it, but it's the same thing. With the dogs, it's funny, at least with my dogs, they're funny because every time they go in the store, they act like, I've never been in here before. This is amazing. You've been in that store 1,000 times. We've got to work on, I've got to get him back to heel and everything. My older dog, he's much better at it. He only needs to be told once and he's going to be good. The younger dog, she's still got a little bit of puppy in her. So she's got to be reminded several times throughout the store that, we're here for you, not for me so much. So we've got a mission in here, and that's to keep you under control and healed. But I always have great conversations in the store too, because nobody in Rural King knows what a poodle pointer is or what a small Munsterlander is. So I've got my elevator pitches that I give for, try and keep those conversations going and interesting. And, people are generally nice, but I also like to keep them fairly short.
I think that there's a lot of value in all of that stuff, because and I'd love to have people come to Pheasant Fest. I'll give a big pitch to those guys, because you can see every kind of dog dogs I've never heard of. And I have a chance to go talk to, I'm sure you and I met at Pheasant Fest, but probably in a billion people there in passing, because I know I stopped at the Small Munsterland booth. And then I get to see every dog that's available. And so I think there's things like that the more we can attend those things, the more we can support the Pheasants Forever people. You just talked about NAVDA and the different dogs that are in your NAVDA chapter. I've got a person that I'm going to have join NAVDA, one of my neighbor girls that's at vet school right now, or vet tech school right now. I'm going to have her join NAVDA because she's a dog lover. And she'll volunteer, she'll get involved, she'll get to see a bunch of different kinds of breeds, and then she'll be telling people about that. And she'll have firsthand knowledge because she was actually there and actually saw it. So I think that's the challenge we have when we have a rare breed dog, is we have to find avenues to get their recognition. And I just can't understand why everybody in the country doesn't have a Braque du Bourbonnais right now. But,
Sure. And your vet tech student friend probably brings a lot to the chapter as well. She can probably provide maybe a sporting dog first aid clinic to your NAVDA chapter,
right,
and kind of enhance everybody's knowledge a little bit, because I don't think you can know too much about sporting dog first aid, especially for those of us that hunt. I just knocked over all my books, but I've read this book several times, and it's got a place on my bookshelf, or what was a bookshelf a few minutes ago before everything just fell over.
Yeah, that's cool. And everybody carries, I think, some kind of a first aid kit with you. And we, a lot of times when we're hunting, when we're in, central South Dakota by the Missouri River, we might be 100 miles from a vet, especially on a weekend, a vet that would actually be open and allow you to come in. And so, we talked a little earlier about snake bites out, and we're, in that part of the country, especially during the early part of the season. And so we go get them vaccinated, but that doesn't mean, even though that they're vaccinated with a snake shot, which a lot of people are not aware of that either, if you're not around rattlesnakes or in an area where rattlesnakes exist. But that way, it gives you an extra hour or two maybe before you can get to a vet to make sure that dog survives that, because a lot of dogs don't. And it's that vaccination. And it's not expensive, but you have to find a vet that's cooperative, because I think they have to bring in about 50 shots worth of the venom or the antibiotic, so that they can buy single, syringe that's got a dose in it. They have to buy enough. And so we vaccinated all of our dogs, and then I brought some of my friends in there and got their dogs vaccinated. So that made it so that it wasn't onerous to the vet to pay that, to use 2 shots and bring in all that vaccination material. And so it worked out pretty good. Now all of our dogs will need to get that redone in June, and so we'll have to give them a booster shot, all of them. But there's some. You hate to lose a dog any way in the world, but to lose it to something you can prevent, that's the hard part. And that's why I like your first aid idea and the vet tech idea. It's just something that, we have a stapler, and I've been practicing giving a piece of plastic or rubber stitches. I have a niece that's in medical school, so she helps me learn the stitching, but you hope like heck you never have to do that. But that might be the difference between life and death in your dog.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And I like that book. I'll be getting that book today. I really like the thought of that, because we're on our own. I mean, when we're out in the field, it doesn't matter if you're in Indiana or in South Dakota or Montana or wherever you're at. You got to have some kind of at least beginning tertiary care to be able to give to those animals that might save their life.
There's a lot you can do, whether if it's cooling your dog down, providing electrolytes, stopping bleeding, or preventing infection. I mean, I think if you can, and I'm not a vet or a vet tech or any sort of formal training in any sort of canine emergency care or anything like that, which I think everybody knows that. But if there's any little thing that you can do to help your dog just survive the trip to the emergency vet, then we should probably do that. Here we have to deal with traps. So if you don't know how to open a trap back up, then you need to be really careful about where you go with your dogs during trapping season here. So I keep some of the tools to open up the foothold traps, and I keep cable cutters for snares.
Yeah, holy cow.
And then I just watch out for conibear traps, because if I don't think there's much you're going to do for a conibear trap. If your dog gets in there, the dog will probably be dead before you can open the trap up. Now, I've seen some of them out duck hunting before, and I'll duck hunt somewhere else. It's not worth my dog getting a scent of the beaver bait and trying to swim over to it.
Right. Well, and the hard part is you usually have to have 2 people every time you do that too. One to hold the dog when you're starting to mess with the area of its leg or whatever that's hurt. They're not always too keen on having you go down there, even though you're helping them. You need somebody to keep their muzzle kind of controlled so they don't bite you while you're doing it. So
I carry a small nylon flat leash with me, because not only I can use it as a leash if I need to. If I need to heal my dog and I need to have my dog leashed, I can use the leash for its intended purposes. But I like the flat leash because I can also wrap it around the dog's muzzle in like a slip knot, and it becomes a field expedient muzzle for the dog.
Fantastic idea.
I haven't had to use that. I learned that trick from Dr. Ruth Ann Lobos, though, she does a lot of emergency veterinary clinics. I went to one of her clinics, and she mentioned that you should have a flat nylon leash in your first aid kit. Here in Indiana, I don't have porcupines, so I don't break my dogs on porcupines. We do have a lot of rattlesnakes in a very small part of Indiana, but you can't bird hunt on the property that's loaded with rattlesnakes. So I don't worry about rattlesnakes either. But then if I go somewhere else, then I have to be thinking about these things.
Right.
I like to do a lot of grouse hunting, and I know it's just a matter of time before we run into porcupines somewhere.
Sure.
We're prepared to do it, but
you're going to be in Kansas and Nebraska, and a lot of areas of those states have rattlesnakes as well. And here I live 2 hours from where there are rattlesnakes at, which doesn't even seem like it makes sense. But I live like more, my area of the state looks like Minnesota or Iowa or Indiana. Cornfields, pretty flat. But as you get out west, you're in the Wild West. Then there's very little population and a ton of open space. And that's where those things live. And there's more of a banana belt there because we have the Black Hills that run across the western edge of the state. And no different than if you lived in Montana on the east side of the mountains. The east side of those mountains puts you in a banana belt area where it's easier for those snakes and those kind of things to survive year over year. So it just, you got to know a little bit about where you're going and what you're doing in order to make sure that you're doing it well. And they protect your dogs, a lot of those. And porcupines are probably as bad of a thing as you can encounter. I mean, take your dog to the ER and have 100 quills pulled out of its face and mouth.
I think it can be fairly routine as long as you're able to, as long as you're willing to pull the quills and, and you're confident enough to, to do it. But I've heard of situations where dogs have taken quills into the chest and it's actually punctured into their thoracic cavity.
Oh, and wow.
Now you've got a dog with a pneumothorax that, I can't fix that myself. Certainly. That's, obviously that takes a surgeon.
Right.
So that's scary.
It is. Yeah. And we don't have those right here, but I would say all of the northern half of the state and most of the western half of the state has porcupines. We're looking at in our NAVDA group. We had that discussion a couple nights ago that they're thinking about bringing in some snakes from Arizona and maybe even a snake handler that's going to help us to do snake avoidance for, and if you have to do that, that's something, a proposition that you have to be aware of, because if there are people that actually have a career to do that, there's a value in it. There's a benefit to it. And so we're in that zone. And anybody that has dogs that are going to go into that area, please check into the rattlesnake vaccine, because, and I don't have any relationship with those guys. It just makes me feel more comfortable when my dogs are safe when I'm out in the field.
I'll have to follow up with you if you do that snake breaking clinic. I'd be interested in hearing how that went with your dogs, especially, with your dogs being generally a little bit softer than most. I'm interested in seeing how that played out, because my Munsters are going to be in the same situation. They're pretty softer, cooperative dogs.
Right.
Well, we have a lot of dogs in the Southwest that do a lot of that rattlesnake training, and they have a lot of success with it.
Yeah, but I'll give you kind of the dynamics of it when we do that, because a couple of our dogs will be going to that just because one of my dogs that's about 10 feet away from me now, licking his leg, he encountered a rattlesnake, and I could see he was acting funny. And I went over there, and the snake was trying to get away from him, thankfully. It wasn't coiled up, it wasn't rattling. But I got over there, and you can always tell a rattlesnake because their head is shaped like the ace of spades.
Yep.
It's got that shape. And when you see that shape and it's a flatter head, if it's round or pointed, generally not venomous, at least in this continent. And so when you see that spade head, I got all of our dogs out of there and just moved to a different area of that field. And then we just got out of there, really, because I figured if there's one rattlesnake in there, there's probably more. And it's really, on the sharp-tailed grouse and the prairie chicken hunting around here starts in September. So it could be 80 degrees outside, and the snakes are thick then when it's that temperature.
Sure.
By the time we pheasant hunt in October, and it's, get some nights that are in the 30s or 20s, they're all denned up, and there's no real risk of running into anything like that. And if they did, they're so docile because they're so cold that they're really not a threat to anything.
Yeah, I did run into a copperhead when we were pheasant hunting here in Indiana, and this would have been in December, and it was a chilly day, and just right along a creek, I almost stepped on it. It was so cold, and that snake just couldn't move. So I actually picked it up, and I showed it to my buddy that I was hunting with. He said, "What's that?" I said, "It's a copperhead. I just can't do anything." I tossed it up on the bank, and we went on our hunt. I was really surprised to see it and see any snake that time of year, though.
Yeah, well, and it just, I never even thought about that, but that, you have a whole different variety of snake you might run in a copperhead or a water moccasin or whatever. If they're hunting in those southern states that are Gulf states, there's my assistant was from when my old career was from there, and you had all kinds of things to worry about. and so their
Yeah.
cats got killed by snakes, and just an accidental encounter, and the snake got freaked out, bit it, and they found it. Just the snake couldn't eat it; it was too big for for food.
Right.
Just killed it because it scared it, startled it.
Wow.
And so you got to be careful.
Yep. So you mentioned you had poodle pointers, and you mentioned you had short hairs. Have you had bird dogs your whole life?
I was kind of an interesting hunting experience throughout my life. When I was growing up initially, my dad was a school administrator and had all the weekends, and a lot of times he could get off early. And when I was 5 years old in southern Minnesota, he would take me out pheasant hunting, which meant that I sat in the car and watched him hunt pheasants. Or I walked behind him in the same trail. But yeah, I can remember him shooting many times 2 pheasants with one shot, and they were thick at that point in time. So that would have been in in the middle 60s. So that tells you how old I am. But we were shooting pheasants at that point in time, and then when we got a little bit older, we moved near Minneapolis. And in Minneapolis, there's no birds. It's like hunting in Indiana, like you and I talked about. That it's
Right.
lucky if you see a bird in the weekend. So, or at least you're lucky if you shoot a bird in the weekend. So we ended up doing that. As kids, we were just motivated to go get pheasants. But I was fortunate enough that my dad grew up in this general area that I live now, and so we would come back here with all of his high school buddies and go hunting in the cornfields of South Dakota, and that was my first exposure to labs. And I wasn't the fondest guy of labs at that point because they a lot of times didn't do a good job of finishing up our hunt when they scared a lot of the birds out. But they were great retrievers, and we had fun hunting with them. And having a dog or having no dog, as we've talked about, 100 times better having those dogs. So I was familiar with those, and then as I got a little bit older, after I got out of college, I was a chef for a period of time, and I bought some short hairs, and we bred them like I told you a little bit, but we also did a very good job of getting some real high-end pedigrees from Missouri. The problem was everybody in the state hunted with labs, and if you brought a short hair out, they weren't very conducive to hunting the short hair, and so we had to kind of break into 2 different groups, the lab guys and the pointer guys. And the labs did find some of them. I mean, I'm not trying to bash that breed. It's just that they're an affable, beautiful dog. But just for the hunting, the way we hunted, that wasn't very good. And so we got used to short hairs, and we'd keep them. And we had a little bit of a challenge with those dogs, too, because they're not calm in your house. And so my wife wasn't too keen on them. So I'd put them in the kennel a lot of the times, during the day when I wasn't hunting. I had an outdoor kennel that I built for them. And then what happened is when we take them hunting, those dogs, I mean, we were in great shape. We were young. Those dogs would be 150 yards in front of us. You almost had to run up to get on their points, so that they weren't on a point for 8 minutes or 10 minutes. And pretty soon, it just got worse and worse. So we'd run the dogs behind our pickup for 5 to 10 miles sometimes to just try and wear them out a little bit. So when they got in the field, they were more useful. And so we did that. And then I got into a corporate job where I had to travel all over the U.S. and I just couldn't really own a dog, and treat it properly. And eventually I ended up getting it for a short period of time when I had a little break. I got a German wire hair that I got a really good deal on from a breeder here that only had one testicle. And he had trained that dog up pretty well. And I mean, it was one of the best hunting dogs I've ever been behind. I mean, it was a beautiful dog, smart. I mean, when I was out in the rural cities around here, if you stay in the hotel, the dogs are as welcome in the rooms as the humans are. So that dog would sleep in bed with me a lot of nights, because he was just a phenomenally good dog. And then it just got to the point where he needed more than what I was providing with exercise and time. And so we got him to a different hunting family. And then I went to that full-time hardcore flying all over the U.S. in this corporate job, and I couldn't manage a dog. Then when that finally came to an end, I went on search for a calmer dog because of my experience with the short hairs. And the wire hairs were a little tough too, but usually, at the beginning of the season, if you saw a deer or something, a pretty hard correction with the e-collar and he would walk next to me for maybe 15 minutes. Then he didn't need to be corrected for the rest of the whole year. It just that kind of memory, jogging back into what they know and understand. And so then like I said, I wanted a calmer dog. And I always liked pointers, and I always I kind of like Brittany's because they're a little bit smaller, and if you're going to keep it in your house a lot, having a 95-pound German short hair is overwhelming a little bit, unless they're
the big short hair.
Yeah, unless they're really calm. And our neighbors had a big, huge male short hair like that was as well mannered as any dog I've ever seen. But I wanted something calmer, so I got on the internet, and there's like, I don't know how many pointer breeds there are, but there's a ton of them.
Well, there are at least 32. I know that.
Yeah, so 32 for sure. And some of them, like we said, never heard of, never seen one. So I was like, gosh. But then I started reading about the characteristics. And I don't always trust everything they say in the characteristics 100% either, because there's exceptions to every dog. I mean, and maybe some of the dogs are that way, but I'd rather talk to somebody that bred the dogs so that I knew what they really, could promise me. And so I found that, it was a weird name, that Braque du Bourbonais. We call them BDBs, so you don't have to spit out that whole Bourbonnais business. But I started looking online about those dogs. And I happened to Google where I could buy one. And to my surprise, it was like 5 miles away. There was a breeder. And so I contacted him, and I wanted to go look at the dogs. Well, you and I both know when you see a puppy that's 4 weeks old, that's not a very good indication of what the breed or what it's going to look like as an adult. There are like 4 or 5 blobs of white flesh, white hair. And so I looked at my wife and I said, I don't know enough about these dogs that I want to spend, $1,000, $1,500, whatever it was on that. And then for some reason or another, I guess divine intervention, I'd call it, the stud dog was barking in the basement. So the owner went and got the stud dog to bring out to the bathroom. And I saw that stud dog and I was like, holy moly, I want one of these dogs, because I saw what the finished product looked like. And so we wrote him a check on the spot as soon as I saw that stud. And a few weeks later, we picked him up, and that dog was smart from the day we got him. We taught him tricks immediately when he got home. We taught him obedience. And by the time he was 6 months old, I sent him to hunting school with an elderly gentleman that had a preserve that was really soft with dogs, because these are a soft breed. And he came home a hunting machine. I think a lot of it's natural, but still, you got to refine what you want him to do with, if you're going to encourage that to be a part of what they do naturally in your training. And so we had a badass hunting dog. And unfortunately, I got the dog fixed during that time too, because he's a great specimen. He has a huge chest like a greyhound and can run, as fast as my side-by-side will go just about. And so we ended up with him. And once we got him home and found out how smart he was and how compatible he was, and he was calm, and, we're big hockey fans, so we're watching hockey on television, and here the dog is by our feet, completely content. But during the day, we'd had to take him out. We live on a 10-acre plot of land, and we'd take him out on the 10 acres, and he'd run his butt off. That was it. And once he got that energy out of him, then he was ready to come back and do whatever we wanted to do, whether it was riding in the car somewhere, the pickup somewhere, or sitting here in the house. And so I kind of fell in love at that point in time, because it wasn't doing hot laps around my kitchen table. It wasn't chewing the leg off of my chairs. I mean, it was just calm.
And they're so comical too.
Yeah, and so it was just we fell in love. And so I asked the breeder then, I wanted a really alpha aggressive female. And we got her. I mean, she's still, 5 years old, 4.5 years old, and she's like a ball of fire every second of her life. And so we got what we wanted, and we wanted to breed then, because we love the dogs, and I was going to retire at some point. Well, unfortunately, that breeder had to go out of business. There's some, family circumstances, and so I bought out his kennel, and I got that big stud dog that I saw, and I got to buy him. I probably could have bought a car as cheaply as I bought that dog for, but the dog I wanted. And so we got the dog that we wanted, and then we started breeding, and then we just started growing our kennel. And we started importing dogs from Lithuania initially, and we sold our first couple of litters, and they went just as fast as we could put them on the ground. And then after that, we started expanding so that we knew the bloodlines, and we knew where we could pick. And if I buy a dog from this kennel, I can buy one that I know will be at least 5 or 6 generations back before there's common ancestors. And unfortunately, a lot of times you're looking at grandpas or great grandpas that's as far back as you can get, because there just isn't enough of these dogs in the United States. Plus, like, our stud dog has been probably the father to 100, 200 dogs. And so when you have that many dogs with that one stud, and then their puppies have dogs or have puppies, then pretty soon there's a lot of stuff tied to one. And when you find a really good stud that's a good hunter and has the conformity and everything you want in a dog, then that kind of ties that up a little bit. So then we buy more dogs from Europe. And now I've partnered up with a couple of guys, and we trade dogs back and forth just to, eventually all of our dogs will be related. But for the time being, we can really diversify the COI, the inbred, quotient of the dog. And so that's kind of how it all came to pass. And so we've owned quite a few hunting dogs. I've never owned a lab. I've never owned a golden retriever. Most everything I did was pointer dogs. And and now that's our life. Like I said, I retired, and so there's probably 5 or 6 dogs looking at me right now. What the hell are you doing? You're not paying attention to me. But,
who are you talking to?
Yeah. What's that guy in that box?
What's funny about all that, so you've obviously grown into, in a short time, into a pretty mature kennel, but you started out by breaking the cardinal rule of puppy buying, which is you went to look at puppies.
Right. Exactly right. Exactly right.
But I'd say it worked out really well for you.
Well, and like I said, my biggest regret is I got him fixed, because his son is better than he is. And now he's hearing that too. Don't get too big of a head, Pappy.
Amber, did you grow up with bird dogs, or did you get into it with Steve, or how'd that work for you?
I did not grow up with bird dogs. I grew up with a cat. I met Steve, and he had a German short hair.
German wire hair.
German wire hair, sorry. And I did not hunt. And Steve was awful busy with work, so he didn't get out as much. So I didn't get into the hunting aspect of all of this until we got the Braque du Bourbonais. And then I started becoming a pheasant hunter, and I actually shot my first deer this year, last year.
Right on. Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
Yeah, and so then that was really nice, because a lot of the trips I went on, to be fair to Amber, is that was pretty much the guys thing. It was kind of like when you're in the clubhouse when the Little Rascals, they didn't want any girls in the club, and that was kind of when we went on these hunts. It was more of a man type of get together. And so, but she helped care for that dog a lot and loved him up a lot. Mm-hmm. He was a smart ass dog. That was a smart wire hair, and he ended up with a different family where he got to hunt more. So we were really happy about that. And we really longed for a hunting dog. I sure did. I mean, when I had time, when I was in hotels around the country, I would page through the internet to see what I wanted. And surprisingly, I never came across a Braque du Bourbonnais. That was one. That's just, I think there's a lot of dogs that people never even have heard of, let alone seen one of them. And so that just happened to be one of them. And now, like I said earlier, our mission is to show everybody on the earth that these dogs are fantastic, and pay attention to them. They're if you want a softer dog, one that can live in the house. That's kind of the questions when we're initially interviewing somebody that wants a puppy. First of all, does your wife even know you're getting a dog? Because we've seen what happens when you surprise your wife with a hunting dog. That always isn't, you might as well bought her a vacuum. And so that's just not a cool thing to do. And so when they do that, that's one question we ask. And then secondarily, how much do you hunt? And a lot of people think they're big hunters and that they hunt a lot. And when they break it down, they hunt maybe 10 or 12 days out of a year. And I'm like, you know what? This is going to be your pet and your hunting companion. So make sure you buy something that you can stand having around you, that you can have in your house, hopefully. And that makes a lot of difference on whether you're going to have success with. I'd say that's for any hunting dog. If you're not aware of the characteristics of the dog and the energy needs and how they're going to behave inside of the confines of your home, that's a pretty hard thing to correct once you get the dog home and it's wired for 220 and it's going to burn hot laps around your kitchen table. They're just pretty hard to break that. And I think you end up with a lot better hunting dog, at least it's been my experience, if they're with you a lot. Not necessarily in the hunting capacity, but even if they're sitting on your lap on your recliner with you. The more you build a bond with those dogs, I think they start to get a little bit almost telepathic because they know what I'm doing and they can read me and they can read my body language and they know, well, look what he's doing here. I know what that means. So then they're veering off in the direction that I'm veering off in, or they're looking back to see what I'm doing so they know what to do. And I that's part of the reason why we love these dogs too. They're staying close enough that you can control them. I'm old, so if I had a dog, like I said, 150-yard point, I'd probably have to have oxygen by the time I got to the thing. And it might have been 10 minutes later. So I don't want to do that. I want to have a hunt that I can get up on the birds that are there and get a shot. And that's kind of the reward of my dog too, is they did the work and I shoot a bird and then they get to go get it and bring it back to me. That's what our goal is, right? That's what we're trying to accomplish. And so that way, if I buy a dog that will help me to accomplish just that, where they get pleasure out of the hunt that they have with me, then it's well worth it.
I agree. I like a pointer because it gives me a little bit of flexibility to maybe, throw the shotgun over my shoulder in a safe direction or something like that. I don't have to be on the gun at the ready,
Right.
as if, hunting with a flusher. But I also like a closer working pointer that's going to go where I want to go, as long as I'm smart enough to let the dog go where the dog wants to go, right? They always say, follow the hunter with the biggest nose. We're not always the best at doing that, for sure. But, to your point, I don't always want to have to walk 400 or 600 yards out to my dog on point. And I had no idea the dog was on point if not for Mr. Garmin in my hand. So I'd rather see the dog go on point, with 100 yards or maybe even a little bit closer, and then walk there, let the dog do its work, and then, come back with a bird to hand. To me, that's just a more fun way to hunt.
Yeah, me too. And how much gear do you want to carry along? You got your Garmin in one hand, your gun in the other hand. I mean, pretty soon you're almost hunting with the drone. You got all the electronic gear in front of you. We do that. I mean, we have all of our dogs on. I think we can put 15 dogs on that Garmin. But we do it more in case we get in those, like I said, 2 square mile grasslands, and they scare up a jackrabbit or a deer or something and take off. You could spend half a day 2 days looking for a dog when you let them range out when we're hunting sharp-tailed grouse. So it's important, and if they'll stay close to you. Most of the hunting we do is pheasant hunting. We don't have any quail that I'm aware of around here. Every once in a while, we'll run into a Hungarian partridge, but those aren't very prevalent around here either. It's mainly pheasants, and so these are about the perfect size for doing that. They're most of the time the females aren't over 40 pounds. I got that one alpha female. She's probably 45. But I also have females that are like 38 pounds or 36 pounds. So depending on the size of dog you want to, you can watch which pairing we breed. Then we'll know we're going to have a little bit smaller dogs. Or if you want I have a great big bruiser sitting next to me, and he's a male that's almost 60 pounds. He's a guy that could amputate both of your legs if you're not careful when he's running full speed. A big boy.
Just come and clip you, huh?
Yeah. Well, they're chasing something, a bird or another dog, and if you're not aware of what you're doing. You got to watch your knees. That's always a consideration too, is the size of a dog. A lot of people ask us because they want that size of a dog. They want a small Munsterlander. They want a Brittany. They want a Bourbonnais. They want something that's they can fit 3 of them in their SUV instead of having this kennel that you got a small pony in to unload your dog. And then they last better in the field, in my opinion, when they're small dogs like this. They can be out when it's a little bit warmer. They can work in the big grass, especially, a lot more because they are agile and they're light on their feet. And so as a result of that, depending on where you hunt, it makes a lot of difference in what dog you buy too.
There are 2 different schools of thought, and I'm a smaller dog guy. I prefer, like my small Munsterlander, my female right now is 38 pounds at the vet just last week, and she's not quite 2.5 yet, so she may put on a couple more pounds, but that's going to be about what she's going to be. But I've had people say, well, I like a bigger dog because there's less wear and tear. If that dog's, working terrain and going over things, it's easier for a big Gordon to step over something than it is for a small Braque du Bourbonais to jump over it.
Right.
Right. And that kind of makes sense. But then the smaller dog people will say, well, yeah, but it's less wear and tear on joints because it's just less weight being carried around all the time. And, my dog can get through cover rather than having to plow through or going over. I think it really just comes down to preference at the end of the day with dog size.
Well, a lot of these things find game trails too, and they can sneak through with the big heavy brush where you and I have to plod through that because we can't, and we're not 2 feet off the ground, so they can get through that stuff a lot of times too. And that's where the birds are. They can't walk through that stuff either. And so if they can get there, but it's 100% preference, and it's 100%, I think, what you grew up with and what you saw and what you're familiar with, and the temperament that you like and where you hunt.
Right. One of my own little quirks is I don't let my dogs jump off the tailgate of my truck because I've heard of so many injuries from just a simple thing of a dog jumping off a tailgate. And it's funny. Yeah. They can be maniacs out in the woods and go over, under, and through every obstacle out there, but jump off a tailgate and you end up with a shoulder injury or a knee injury or something like that. So I lift my dogs and set them down. I let them jump back up.
Right.
But, and my poodle pointer weighs about 62 pounds. I'd lift him and set him down, but it's a lot easier to lift up my small Munsterlander and set her down at a whopping 38 pounds. And I'm thinking, okay, so 20 years from now, when I'm in my mid to late 60s, do I want to be lifting 60, 65 pound dogs, or do I want to be lifting 40 pound dogs?
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a lot of sense. And, like I said, that all those considerations go into choosing a dog. And I don't have I don't have all the answers to which direction to go. And I prefer pointing dogs. Then there's a lot of people that have a wholly different vision of that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with either one of them or any of them. It's just what you like to do. And to me, a pointing dog, when you get to have that moment when that dog, like you said, is running through the field, catches a whiffed, gets a little bit of wind in its face and smells a bird, and it just stops like on a dime, turns and points like it's a weather vane, just on that solid hard ass point, and that within 15 yards there's a bird there, and you release them and you get the best shot on earth. Hopefully you can hit it, but you get the best shot on earth, and then your dog gets the reward that it did for doing its job.
So what's up next for this year for your kennel? What do you guys have going on?
Well, right now, we were lucky this year because I think in February and March, we got into Covey Rise magazine. So we had a chance to learn how that all works. And that's a nice way to get, a recognition for the breed. The article wasn't about our kennel. It was about the dogs. And I guess we're probably one of the bigger kennels. So they chose us to be a part of that. And we got a chance to have a photographer come out and do a photo shoot for almost a whole afternoon. We had pigeons, chuckers, quail, ducks, pheasants. And so we got our dogs in all kinds of different scenarios, which really helped. They had some great points. They were shooting over. One of the friends that let me use their property for this photo shoot. He had the gun drawn on a pheasant right in front of the dog that just was still on the point. And then I think the greatest thing for us was that it showed a picture of our dogs in the water retrieving ducks, because one of the knocks on the BDBs is that they're not big water dogs. And I would say 100% that's not true. You can tell me that any breed doesn't like the water, and if you introduce it to them properly and you give them comfort in doing it, once they get a chance, they'll go swim on their own. You won't have to try and lead them there by shooting a bird in it or whatever. So we got that value and that opportunity from doing that, and met some nice people. And they were at Pheasant Fest too, so that was nice. And so this community just starts shrinking that you work in when you're working with dogs. Get in NAVDA, you get involved with some of these, like the Pheasant Fest type of operations. And there's other things besides those two. Those are just the most recent. And all of a sudden, you get a greater appreciation for your dog, I think, and then you get your exposure for your dog, just like you did at the Pheasant Fest with those small Munsterlanders. But we just had 2 litters of pups, and before we had a pretty good list, but lists aren't always 100% reliable. And so, somebody just had a kid, or they decided they're going to get a cat or whatever. So, we have
cat, of course.
pointing cat. And so we have or else they decide to go get a poodle or a labradoodle, and we're just like, holy moly, good for you. And so, so we had a decent list, but we had 18 pups. We're going to keep one for breeding because it was phenomenal, and it's out of the original dogs that we bought from that breeder. This is the maybe 3rd or 4th generation down, and they're all amazing hunters. So we want to propagate that, and in order to stay in breeding, you have to purchase dogs, or keep dogs, whichever it amounts to, continuously, because you only have a few years where it's really ethical to breed a dog, maybe 2 to 6 or 2 to 7. And then that's it. And so that's kind of what we do is doing that. And I think there's somebody picking up a dog tomorrow. And then we're sending a couple of dogs to a friend of ours that raises Griffons. That's a really, really good trainer. And so he's training just the puppies to get a little bit of, obedience and some commands and so on. I'm making that guy a ton of money. Maybe I should become a trainer. But now he's going to have those dogs back when they get old enough to get pheasant training. And he has a preserve too. So we're very fortunate that we have that. He's trained some of our dogs too, and then they've scored well in NAVDA as a result. And so we probably will have 1 or 2 more litters this year. I usually like to have litters now so that the puppies are going home, in April or May. It sucks a little bit in the winter because the dogs don't want to go outside and go potty. And you can't have them running around in your yard as easily. They have to get acclimated to the cold living here anyway. But we'll have probably 2 more litters. And if they get a litter now when we do this in April, then by the time hunting season comes around, their dog isn't going to be out pointing and retrieving, but it can accompany them on the hunt.
Oh, sure.
They buy a dog that's 8 weeks old and think they're going to bring it out in the field. And I'm like, oh man, don't do that. The puppy that can't put up with that much wear and tear on his body, first and foremost.
No.
And secondarily, you're going to get it gun shy more than likely because that dog doesn't understand quite what the concept of this whole process is. So if we can do litters now, I like doing it better. But, again, we had 2 litters that were right 4 days apart, 18 dogs. And about 5 or 6 of those were the short-haired version too. So they're short-tailed version, and that's like hitting the jackpot because that's what the French were trying to do with these dogs is either have tailless or very short tails. And so I think we're going to continue on that. We're looking at now doing some training because I am retired. I don't have much to do except for my honey-do list is still pretty long from being preoccupied with my corporate job for many years.
It's been racking up for years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got a lot of catching up to do, and my wife's very patient, so I'm happy about that. But yeah, I think now we're going to, she's every day has new ideas how to improve our kennel. We have a couple of buildings outside of our house. We have 10 acres and we have about an acre fenced in and a plastic coated galvanized fence. or a chain link fence, and the buildings are heated and air conditioned, and yeah, that's what we've done, and so now we're going to work more. We'll be picking up pigeons here in a couple of days, and with those pups. Then we've got a couple of younger dogs, and I'm going to inherit it. I'm going to buy a dog from another breeder too. So never been really hunt trained, so we'll start working on our own training. And I learn a little bit about that every time I meet with this trainer that I go out and see. And I've done a little bit of the training, which I hadn't really done in my life. And the confidence that puts in dogs when they get some commands that they are rewarded for and they're praised for, gosh, that just changed the whole, that dog just changed in like a couple of days, the confidence level of that dog. So I would encourage everybody that buys a hunting dog, train it yourself. And if you can't, hire somebody. It's like buying a rifle. You only bought half the cost of that thing because now you got to go buy a scope.
Right.
That might cost more than the rifle. Well, buy a dog and go buy a good trainer too, if you can't do it yourself, or read. There's NAVHDA chapters are great. They teach you how to do that if you want to commit some time to go into that. I praise our NAVHDA chapter. They're great at doing that. And so that's the kind of thing that we're going to be doing more of, so that we can have a dog that's even... people have asked us a lot for started dogs. I won't do a finished dog because I don't think I have the skills for that, but they want started dogs. And we have a place where we can get enough pheasants so that I can shoot enough birds over them that I think we're going to try doing a little bit of that, so that some of the times the people, the out-of-state people especially, that have a little more money, I'm not saying in-state people don't, but the people that fly out here in their private jet, they want a dog that they don't have to do anything with. And so that's the kind of thing that I think there's a market for that here in our area.
I think there are a lot of people that don't have that, they want a hunting dog, they want to hunt over their own dog, but they don't have the time, patience, or energy for a puppy. And that's where the market for the started dog comes from. And your definition of a started dog and my definition and Amber's definition and the neighbor's definition might all be different, but there's somebody out there that puts value in that dog that they don't have to, let's say, crate train and house break.
Right.
Or, maybe they just don't have a place where they could do a gun intro and a bird intro.
Right. Yeah. If you live in a city, how do you do that?
Right.
I mean, it costs you a lot of money. You got to get out of town. You got to have a place to even store. We have a pigeon coop out in our kennel. So whether I have pheasants in there or chuckers or pigeons or whatever it is, I can go 100 feet from my house and I'm ready to work. And 10 acres of, most of it's alfalfa that the neighbor takes care of. And so I have knee-high grass here in a couple months or a couple weeks. And then I've got the perfect training grounds, and I put some throwers out and some pigeons out, and pretty soon a puppy that's 12 weeks old is already pointing birds, and understands, that when I let the bird fly, that we're going to shoot. We won't shoot right over that puppy, but we're going to shoot a 28 gauge, and we introduce it to a little bit of gunfire, so that it's focused on a bird, focused on the bird it found. I'm over here shooting a gun, so they know that that's what happens when they point at a bird and when it flies. And then eventually we start shooting them, and that's why I keep an older dog, because then they'll go retrieve. And then the puppy sees that, and they're like, oh, that looks like they get a lot of praise for doing that. I'm going to try that. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, but
sure.
The way to get them at least introduced to the idea.
Right.
We're going to retire a couple of older dogs that are going to go to people that want a dog, like you talked about, that's already potty trained, that knows when to go in and out, that'll sleep in a crate, that's been with us for 7 or 8 years and just is not really very much used to hunt anymore because it's getting arthritic and getting old. And so we're going to rehome a couple of those dogs and get them to a place where people love having a dog like that. So then they're not in the pack world where it's a little more competitive and their existence a little tougher as they get older. So we like to move them to somewhere where they can have a calm, peaceful way to. A couple dogs I will never do that with, but a lot of them is, if you're going to breed, you got to keep bringing new dogs in and young dogs in, and eventually you got old dogs. And unless you've got the capacity to hold, we have 7 or 8 females and 3 male dogs that are our breeders, and it's a lot of work on. I know we're a small breeder in comparison to many I've seen, but for a mom and pop operation, that's a lot of work.
I think, yeah, that's a lot. That's not, 11 dogs is not a small operation by any stretch. I mean, I'm still on one breeding female, and I've got another puppy coming this summer, and obviously, she's got 2 to 3 years before she's ready, if she's even ready, if she's the right dog.
Right. Yeah.
It's just part of the risk is figuring it out, right?
Yeah. And then you got to go get their hips tested and make sure that,
Yeah.
and any other tests you want to run. Well, now we can get pen hip test, the hips and knees. And so, and it's only $100 more maybe. And that's what we rely on is pen hip testing for the hips. And so there's another expense in getting that dog going.
Sure.
That's not an expense necessarily that a person purchasing a dog is going to have, because unless they're going to breed the dog, the laxity to the hips, I don't think makes that much of a difference to them. They're not going to hunt it hard enough. And like I said, keep it from jumping off the roof of your house or off the back of your pickup. Their hips and all of their ball joints have an opportunity to be bruised or even torn. Sure. And so the gentler you can be with them on those kind of things. And these are hunting dogs, so they run their ass off and they run into stuff, and there's nothing you can do about that. But if the things that you can control, you should. I 100% agree with you. Lifting your dog off the tailgate, that makes just only sense.
I was out running my dogs the other day. We were just going down a trail. We were just doing a fun run. Well, they were running. I don't do fun runs anymore. I don't find a whole lot of fun in running personally anymore. There was a log across the trail, and it was one of those ones where you kind of expect, if your dog's at a full sprint, that it's probably going to go over the log, but it was high enough off the ground that they chose to go under it. Oh. And I was really excited when they both dogs went under that log. I said, maybe these dogs will last a little longer. They might be smarter than I gave them credit for.
Well, and that's part of it, and that's I think it's cool when you hunt your dog every day and you hunt the crap out of it, but give them a break every once in a while too. I have a friend where we shot that Cubby Rise photo shoot that he's 72, I think, and he hunts every single day. And as he hunts every day, he takes 2 dogs that he got from us. And I'll never forget, we met him accidentally we bought a dog house from him. And so he didn't know what kind of breed of dogs we had. He'd always had German Shorthairs. And he called me up and he goes, you know what? I've had a German Shorthairs for 40 years. And this dog I got from you is the best hunting dog I've ever had in my life. So that was a huge endorsement. And that's when you feel like you're doing the right thing, when you hear those kind of comments coming back. But it was a situation where he hunts those dogs so hard that about once or twice a week, he has to take a day off. And the dogs don't want to take a day off, but he walks them 5-10 miles through hard terrain, and if we're putting 5 miles on, that dog put 25 miles on.
Sure. Oh yeah.
And so that he's smart about that. And I think there's a lot of, good sense in that you got to, make sure they're like an athlete, they got to have a couple of days to rest and make sure they're getting good food, good nutrition. I think that's a huge help for the situation of owning a dog, if you can do that.
Gotta rest your dogs, which is why it's probably nice to have 10 or 11 dogs in the kennel, and you can rest and still hunt your dogs.
Yeah, and so that's what happens. We might take out 5 or 6 dogs when we go hunting. I used to pull them in a trailer, and I don't like that, so I gave up on doing that. I'd rather put a couple of them in a crate inside my truck, or even let them loose for, we're not going high speeds anywhere. And then put some of them in crates in the back, because I've seen these roughland kennels is about 15 miles, the rough, tough kennels, the hard plastic thing, that's only about 15 minutes from here. I'm at their office where we go to buy those kennels oftentimes, because if you live in town, they have seconds that have a small defect on them, and they cut the price substantially for the defective. Mainly it's color. Some other color bled into a kennel, and so we buy those. But they have photos all over there of dogs that have been in accidents.
Yeah,
and vehicles with those crates. And I know another breed, another kennel company does that as well. But that just another important thing to do too. And we always have that available when somebody flies in to get a dog from us. We have the right container. They don't have to go shop for that. Because if you know how the airlines operate and you get in there and you don't have the right gear, then you're going to have to get in a new flight because you're going to have to go get the right gear. And what a hassle. So we always set them up. Amber always takes care of that, where they get a carrier that's appropriate for the airline they're flying on. And then she packs puppy pads, water, food, all in the poop pickup bags, everything in there. And they're like, what do I do? They're flying from here to Rhode Island. What do I do with my dog if I'm at the airport and you have to ask to go to the bathroom? Bring it into the restroom, put a puppy pad on the floor, and let her go to Dawn. Pick it up. You can do it in the bathroom in the airplane, too. Pick it up, throw it in the garbage, and nobody even noticed what you did. And so it's helpful when most of our dogs don't stay around here. So it's helpful when we have availability of expertise on how to travel with a dog.
Sure.
If you're going to travel in the cabin of the plane, anyway.
Some of the airports have the pet relief areas, but you better know where. If that's your plan, you better know where it is. And if you've got an 8-week-old puppy, the likelihood of making it to the one pet relief area in the whole airport is very, very slim.
It's a mile and a half
my
away.
Experience, yeah.
I don't like those so much because at that time when the people come and get their puppies, they've only had their first, maybe second shot. And you just don't know who has brought their dogs into those pet areas. So
you don't know what's living in there.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
to the bathroom.
And we try to help people understand that. Don't go to the communal dog water dish that's in the restaurant where 40 dogs just drank out of that. And one of them maybe has parvo because it's never been vaccinated in its life or something. So too precious. You got to be smart about that kind of thing.
Sure. Now, I don't even like dog parks that much, to be honest with you. I generally try to avoid them.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of wilderness. Go out in the country around any city. Chicago's a little challenging, but I mean most cities, you can get out in the country somewhere and let them pasture. People don't care, at least in our experience.
So over the years, you guys have had the Braque du Bourbonnais. What's if you could think of like one or two of the standout dogs that you've had, who would they be and why?
Pappy, because he was our first dog.
Okay.
And we named him after Pappy Van Winkle Bourbon, because they're Bourbonnais. And he was just, like I said earlier, he was the smartest damn dog. You couldn't even imagine how fast the dog could learn. And now it's worked to our detriment, because sometimes we try to keep him, put up a gate and keep him in the basement. And that dog could work a combination lock to get around whatever we put up. So he's a little bit of a pain that way, but is such a beautiful dog, smart, comical, engaging with us, really affectionate. And then
I would say Emma.
Oh yeah, well that's not our dog. There's a friend of ours has a dog that's beautiful, but our other dog would be Ellie. That's that aggressive dog. She'll get up.
She's not aggressive. She's
aggressive from a hunting standpoint. Right. She's really
driven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there'll be times when we'll let her out of the kennel and she'll run out in a dirt field and do an arc back to us. And she's going so fast around that arc that she just rolls. I mean, she just loses her, her tires didn't have any more traction. She just rolls.
She hot dogged it.
Yeah. And she just pops right up and she's running full blast. And I've been out training younger dogs with her. And I shot a pigeon poorly. And that pigeon flew probably over half a mile. And that older dog, that Ellie, followed that pigeon, had an eye on it, went through a fence, safely, then got on the other side into a field that's adjacent to our property, and ran all the way out there in the middle of that field. And that pigeon eventually died, in midair, or it got exhausted. And she caught it on the way down, turned around, headed her ass back, and handed that pigeon to me. So she is remarkable. I mean,
you caught that the half-mile Hail Mary.
That's right.
Or intercepted it and returned it for a touchdown, I guess.
Yeah, the center fielder catching it over her head. Yeah, it was amazing. So those are two of our favorites. And our other dog, Emma, a friend that had the short hairs for 42 years ended up with her, and that's the same bloodlines as what we kept a puppy from this time. And his wife, we were just over at the house a few days ago, and his wife said, you know what, if he could marry that dog, he would kick my ass out of this house right now. And he loves that dog so much that he can't hardly. He wanted to have a litter of puppies, and he told me that he was really apologetic to me and said, I'd really liked her to have puppies, but I don't want to have you guys whelp her and have her gone for 3 months. I couldn't live without her. So he says, I'm going to get her fixed. And we have plenty of dogs, and especially her bloodlines. And so that's kind of the story of having another beautiful dog.
Here's our 60 pounds of love right here.
Yeah.
He's had enough of not being able to engage us.
Yep.
That's funny. What's his name?
For real.
I'm sorry, what is it?
Kirill. It's a Russian name. We're big hockey fans, and there's a superstar hockey player with the Minnesota Wild called Kirill, K-I-R-I-L-L, Kaprizov.
Okay.
And so we named him after a hockey player.
What people can't see right now is Kirill just crawled up onto the back, laid down across the back of the couch and put his head down on Amber's shoulder, which is absolutely hilarious. But obviously, you don't get that out of a dog that's got an independent temperament right there. They're obviously cooperative dogs and fun to be around.
Yeah, no, one of them gets up here. They would prefer all to be a dog pile on top of us.
Yep, you've got a BDB pile on Amber right now. That's
and you got to see the two colors, the fawn and the liver.
I'm going to let you guys get to your dogs and give them some attention. And so if you wouldn't mind, if you want to just wrap this up and give us a couple of closing thoughts each.
Sure. Well, first closing thought is I really appreciate the time I've got to spend with you. I mean, it's been interesting, informative. It gives us an opportunity to promote our dogs a little bit more. I would always recommend that you check out other breeds of dogs. I mean, there are more things than labs and short hairs and the few things you hear of or see on TV and hunting shows. Look at the exotic breeds. Look at the rare breed dogs. You'll be surprised at what you find. And what I would ask you to do is so that you can see a little bit about what we do and meet us a little bit, at least on the internet, is just go to Sioux Ridge Pointers. And Sioux is like the Sioux Indians. So SIOUX. Sioux Ridge Pointers. And all of our dogs their photographs are there. Our puppies are all there. All the heritage of the dogs, all the pedigrees are there, and you can see which male we might breed to which female, and then that way you have a really good idea. And then a lot of people, like we've talked about, a lot of people want to come out here and meet the male and the female, the dam and the sire. And so we keep those available here on our property, and if they want to see our operation, we don't let them inside of the buildings because I don't want to clean out and I don't want to go disinfect all that stuff. But we drive them around the whole property and get them a good chance to do that. But yeah, check them out. And don't hesitate to call us. I mean, I was glad when somebody calls me and wants to talk about dogs. I can probably talk for 8 hours about that. And when you called me to ask me about this, I was probably bend your ear off. But really appreciate everything that you do, and I think. If I was to say anything else, recommend that you listen to this podcast. Not this one specifically, but this podcast that you present, because I think that I've listened to quite a few of them, and they're informative, they're fun. People are talking pretty comfortably. It isn't all about just super deep dive into details. It gives you a good idea of different dogs maybe you're unfamiliar with. So I'd really promote and we'll put your podcasts up on our website, and we'll recommend you in everything that we do on social media, because we've had a very positive experience with you, and can't say how much we appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. And I just want to kind of capitalize on one thing that you said. Take a look at the rare breeds. We all love to talk about our dogs, and one way to guarantee that you'll do that is get a dog that few people have seen, or a dog that maybe people have heard of, but they haven't had an opportunity to hunt over, haven't had a chance to look at it, to touch it, to actually experience that dog. Because if you own that dog, you're going to have conversations about that dog every time you take it somewhere.
Yeah, you're a popular person.
Oh, jeez, buddy.
You could have wanted to be in the last shot.
Oh man, I wish I saved these videos. That was really funny.
Sometimes they're insufferable too.
Amber, I know you didn't get a chance to talk much. Do you want to close us out?
I don't know, but I would like to say thank you for giving us the chance to be on it. And your podcast is great. I learned a lot from the ones that I did listen to. And for people wondering about the BDB, you will not be disappointed. They are great family dogs, great hunters, just the perfect dog to have, I think.
Are you guys going to be out of Kansas City next spring?
Most likely, yes.
Okay, great.
Most
Well,
likely.
that good opportunity to see a whole bunch of different bird dogs there. I'll be there as well. So
That was fun.
You know, I never would have dreamt when they asked us to be in that puppy walk,
Dog parade.
the dog parade. I figured there'd be like 30 people there, and we're just going there to distract the people. And I will tell, and anybody that's listening to this should hear it. I bet there was 5,000 people at that event.
that's the biggest part of the whole weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
We felt like we were
That's
walking
awesome.
down the runway at the, in Hollywood. There
The
was
red carpet.
people photographing us from either side, and then we got introduced. And like I said, that guy got all crazy, but Braque du Bourbonais. And so that's what I'll leave you with.
I'm going to save that soundbite.
All right.
Better copyright that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Have a good weekend.
Talk to you later.
I hope you enjoyed episode number 14 of the Woe Post. If you like the podcast, leave a 5-star review wherever you listen. To support, share the podcast with all of your friends. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram at The Woe Post, or become a patron at patreon.com/TheWoePost. You can contact me at my website, www.thewoepost.com, on Facebook or Instagram, or by email, bill@thewoepost.com. Stay steady and God bless.
Braque du Bourbonais.